Hello, everybody. How are you today? And we want to welcome you to Community Conversations right here on Love Bay Afrobeats Music Talk Radio. Let me tell you something. I'm going to have to excuse our co host today. Faith is not here with me, but we're going to keep the show going. And why? Because there are topics that we need to be talking about globally and locally that are impacting our Black communities. If you don't know, I'm Miss J, the founder of Boss Women Society, but more excited to be the host of Community Conversations because I get the opportunity to connect with you. I ask you to help me to understand what's going on, and so we can bring things to light right here on this radio station. Shout outs to all the Love Bay hosts who are here each and every week, giving everything we got to you as our watchers, our viewers, our audience. And it's important that you are a focal point of our conversations. Now, today we're going to be talking about unemployment. For the last few shows, we've been touching on truth and reconciliation, Black violence or that are happening in our communities. We had our back to school special, but the topics, there's just so much to discuss. And so we're going to dive in today talking about the impacts of unemployment in our Black communities. You know, that's a very important topic because let's be real, at the end of the day, we have to support our families some way, somehow. And sometimes to do that, we have to be working 2 to 3 jobs just to do so, especially if you're coming from a single income, right? And sometimes it's not even enough this day and age to have two incomes coming into the home. More than not, people are having to subsidize their incomes by doing other things to bring in what they need. So today we're really going to be examining some of the key findings around why the impact is becoming super negative for the Black communities and what are the things that we can do to pivot. Now, I always say that when we're talking about topics such as these, I want us to take a measure of accountability on what we're doing to make sure that we are making the change, that we are pivoting or adapting to doing the things we need to do to change the narrative. Remember, you can only shift your trajectory if you are willing to take accountability and change what needs to be changed. There was something that I found under an article by Jessica Welburn Page. Her article was about examining the loss of wealth and downward mobility of the African Americans, a review of challenge for the Black middle class. A great article that when I was reading and doing some research on this topic. But some of the things that I wanted to bring were some of her key findings that she did through her research. So, for example, there was 4 key things that I thought were really good, and we're going to touch on how those key findings are showing up in your day-to-day world. Sometimes you're not even sure why things are happening the way they're happening, and this is why we talk about having these pieces. So if you're just tuning in, welcome. We are here with us on the Love Bay Afrobeats Music Talk Radio with your host, Miss J. And today we're talking about the impacts of unemployment in our Black communities. So going back to the article, first she talked about the complex and interconnected obstacles that confront the middle class African Americans that show that middle class status does not provide the same level of protection to them as it does to white Americans. Now, these are some big findings, and I'm not going to dig down too deep. Definitely, if you want, check out Jessica Welburn Page, her article on examining the loss of wealth and downward mobility of the African Americans. The second key finding I thought that was important was she's like, overall, African Americans, even those growing up into the middle class households, are more likely than white Americans to move into socioeconomic problems or spectrums as adults, while white Americans are more likely to move up to the socioeconomic spectrum. Now, that's a big one. And we talk about, the systemic and those oppressions and those pieces that are happening in our workplaces today. But you can see this is not just something that affects you, but definitely affects has a global presence. And so when she mentioned this piece here, ask yourself, are you on that spectrum? Do you see yourself progressing at work? Do you see yourself having issues? Or maybe you're having an amazing career progression. It doesn't happen for everybody, but if you are, great. What can you share with us that we can share with the listeners to know what they can be doing, possibly some best steps? The third thing that I thought was very interesting in her article was the interconnected factors that are creating obstacles for middle class African Americans, which really contributes to some disproportionate mobility rates. So, for example, it could be the wealth gap, or it was housing and neighborhood circumstances, educational and occupational attainment, and the persistence of racism and discrimination. I'm sure everyone who has been through these types of examples or stories are here. I would want to share, and we want you to share. Please send your information. We had some questions around this topic, and this is why we're tackling it today, because this is something that we all need to, whether we're entrepreneurs or whether we're employers or whether we're employees, this impacts everyone. The last piece that I thought was really cool was the persistence of racial inequalities, right? And it suggests that policy actions taken to date have not narrowed the wealth gap, and more significant intervention may be needed to make lasting change. Now, can we say more? We see that there, even amongst the not just racism or not just discrimination, but even occupational wise, we know that there's a tendency for people to have the degrees, but not necessarily get rewarded with those degrees in terms of jobs, that are being overlooked by people with less education, less experience on the job, and they're getting higher positions. Now, I've seen my fair share of that when in my career. However, there were things that I had to first recognize before I did that. Now, what are those pieces? Well, let's jump right in. And again, I'm always going to challenge you to say, how can I pivot and adapt and do what I need to do in order to get where I need to go? One of the things I learned while working in my career was, if you don't understand the language, then you're going to have a hard time at the table translating what's happening around you, or more so, how to articulate your needs in order to get or to be part of those conversations. So I did a little research. As always, I love to research and find out what are some of the top things that are happening, and how is the loss of wealth and mobility for Black people in terms of unemployment influenced by the variety of global factors that intersect with social, economic, political dynamics. So here are a few key global factors that are contributing to this. Are you ready? You need a moment. Go get a pen or pencil, take out your phone, whatever you're using, and write these points down. And I want you to take a moment to reflect on them. These conversations that we have each week are really designed to help you to know what's not just what's going on, but prompting you to ask yourself, how are you going to make change in order for us to kind of start getting rid of things that are happening in our communities. Last week, we had an amazing interview where we were discussing the Indigenous Jubilees year that is coming in, and that was focused around healing. And I think that's super important to remember, because we have to stop living in the wounds that happen to us in our workplaces or that happen to us on the job sites. Why? Because if we can understand what is holding us back, or what the landscape and the environment is, it does make it a little bit more simple to move forward. It helps us to navigate the pressures that we face in the workplace, and it helps us to think through how we're going to ensure that we can maximize on progression. So let's start with the first one. This one here is talking about systemic racism and discrimination. Now that's a pretty normal, I shouldn't say normal, but it's pretty prevalent in today's world. And so when we're talking about, I wanted to focus on the labor market discrimination. So I want to read this point to you. They say racial biases in hiring practices can lead to higher unemployment rates for Black individuals across the globe. It talks about wealth disparities, and studies are showing that resumes with traditionally Black sounding names receive fewer callbacks than those with white sounding names, even with identical qualifications. That's a tough one, isn't it, right? Because if you have a very rooted name and it's not recognized by the people who are reading it, it's easy for it to just be put to the side and considered non-qualified. In the census 2016, they showed that the employment rate of Black people of all ages is lower than the rest of the population. I'm gonna repeat that again. The employment rate of Black people of all ages is lower than the rest of the population. Are you hearing me? I hope you are, because these are super important points to remember. Now, it's not points for you to sit back and say, well, you see now why I'm going to stay on welfare or social assistance, because the world's unfair and I can't get a job and whatever the case may be. That's not why we're here. We're here to recognize that change needs to be made. And how do we do that? Simply by looking at the stats. Just looking at the stats. Another stat from the census 2016 was for those working ages between 25 to 64 years old, the overall unemployment rate was 10.1% for the Black population compared to the Canadian average of 6.4% for the same cohort. Does that sound disproportionate to you? Yes, it does. Yes, it does. If you have questions, comments, you want to share a story, whatever the case is, please just feel free to send us that information. You can send it to infolovebay@gmail.com. Or if there's comments here below, please put them in, and producers will ensure that I can tackle them and bring them to the forefront. But let's go back to that. We were just talking about the unemployment rate is 10.1% for Black people, whereas the average Canadian rate is 6.4%. So if you have 6.4% and you take 10.1, you stick that in there, that's a pretty big piece that represents our culture. Black youth, let's talk about our youth, right? We talk about our kids getting a little summer job. We say, this is a great time and opportunity for them to learn responsibility. If you are not, parents, I'm going to call you on this one, but if your child is not getting any type of experience, whether it's volunteering, co-op, intern, or even, interning, or even just getting a summer job, you are doing your child a disservice. Why? Well, they're saying Black youth between the ages of 15 to 24-year-olds have a higher unemployment rate, which is 34.3% compared to the Canadian average for youth, which is 15.5%. Oh. Actually, 24.3%. Let me correct myself there. 24.3% compared to the Canadian youth average of 15.5%. Are you hearing me right now? I don't know if you are, but I'm going to say it again. We need to recognize that men lie, women lie, but numbers don't, right? We have to recognize that if we are not educating our children to understand the challenges in front of them, the barriers that are being presented, then we're not have the ability to teach them how to hurdle over these things. Now, we're going to talk a little bit later on how we can really factor in these pieces on making that change. Because Ms. J doesn't just come with you with the stats, honey. I come with you with the answers. The answers, yes. I always say to myself when I'm doing any kind of coaching or research for what I do, which is business development, I ask myself one key question. If there needed to be a change, what would that change be? What would I have to do in order to change the future? So when you're listening here today, I want you to really ask yourself that question. Now, if you're in an amazing job, wonderful. But if you're struggling to get that employment, well, we just have to look at what the facts are saying. That if we don't start to make some changes, these numbers are going to continuously get bigger. Let's go to another fact. Census 2016, I'm talking about our Canadian census here. The employment rate was in 2016, the employment rate was 78.1% for Black men and 71.0% for Black women, compared with 82.6% and 75.5% respectively for their counterparts of the rest of the population. Now, these are Census 2016 numbers, and guess what? The 2020, the next census, or these numbers are not really changing. So we have to really look at how can we make change? I'm going to keep saying it. This word change is scary for some people. They think that they won't, it's hard, it's uncomfortable, and yes, it is. But having a bigger paycheck and being able to feed your family and give your children what you want, I think that kind of trumps, right? We have to look at something bigger and say to ourselves, what's going to push us to get to that level, right? Just take a minute and look at your life and ask yourself, am I where, not where I want to be? Ask yourself, am I where I should be based on my knowledge, skill, and capacity? Okay, I'm going to just give a pause there. Take a minute, think about it. Okay. Am I where I should be? Now, there are many people who are coming out and they have all the right qualifications, but yet the struggle is still real. And most of these people coming out with this education are not working in their desired fields, right? I talked to my sister, and we have our little catch ups. And what she went to school for is not what exactly where she worked, where she's working. And it's hard to get into that industry that she wants to get into. And so I say to her, how do you cope with the search and trying to get into something that you actually went to school for? And it's tough out there, right? And we knew that COVID-19 didn't do us any favors with the pandemic, because again, it really had a strong impact. It actually showed that the median annual employment income was 35,000 for core age 25 to 54 for Black adults, and only 7,500 for Black youth between the ages of 15 to 24. 15 to 24, right? And you can see that this compares to the average Canadian, median employment income was 42,000. So we have 35,000 for Black adults, but the Canadian median is 42,000. So we're already down. We're already losing by 5,000 or more dollars. Okay, we're already losing that. The Black youth was just roughly about 90, I think it was 9,900. Yeah, 9,900. And for them, it was only 7,000. Like in this day and age, 7,000 is crazy. Like, how could you live? That's presto. That's, you get, the little food, you buy your clothes, pay your cell phone bill. You're pretty much tapped out, right? And we talked last week about what are some of the things, the factors that are increasing the violence in our neighborhoods, especially amongst youth. Well, I mean, when you hear these kind of numbers, it's a little dismal, right? What are they doing? They're turning to activities that are illegal activities that are yielding. And, for the most part, in my experience working with youth, many, many years in my career, one of the things that I did hear a lot from the youth was, Miss J, like, my mom's already working 2 jobs just to pay for the rent. And she can't afford to put food on our table, much less put clothes on our back. So I have to do something. And there's, especially for the young Black men that I've encountered, and I've worked with well over 50, 60,000 youth in my career. And one of the things that you learn day in and day out is that if we don't get them to a place of understanding that, yes, there are challenges, then there seems to be this strong connection to the end result without thinking about the impact that it's having, right? So they're robbing and killing their own, they're terrorizing neighborhoods. Why? Simply because sometimes it's for them a necessity. Now, does it excuse the situation? No. But is that a reason? Yes, right? So when your children are coming out of school, I know parents are usually, and I'm talking some of our new age parents, love you all dearly, but you all are hurting your children. Why? Because you're like, well, I don't want them to work. I don't want them to focus on anything else. I just want them to go to school and get good grades so they could get a good job. Have you said that before? Think about it. I'm sure you have, right? If you said that before, yes, that would be the ultimate way that we would love to give our children that life, that they could focus on one thing. But here's the problem. Them only focusing on one thing, when they get to the level of employment where they need to compete, they're at a disadvantage because they don't have anything. Extracurricular activities, some don't have. They're not doing any kind of volunteer work, whatever the case may be. Now, the schools have put in this cycle, and I know here in Canada, we've put in that 40-hour volunteer hours that must be done before they can receive their high school graduation certificate. And so that really helps to encourage them to go out and check out fields that they might be interested in. Have you had that conversation? Have you had that conversation with your youth? Well, there's lots for us to discuss today about that. But let's get back to some of the other issues that are happening. We can also look at educational disparities. I mean, right now, going to school is a full-time job. It costs as much as you make in a full-time job, right? And it's hurting because, yes, whether you're getting OSAP and whatnot, you're still incurring a lot of costs. And some of the schools that the youth are coming from are underfunded, and they're not getting the same types of resources in the school as some of their counterparts. And this directly affects employability. There are schools that have a plethora of opportunities and resources for youth to be part of, intern opportunities, or they have guest speakers coming in, or whatever the case is. And then you look at some of our schools who don't have those same resources. I mean, shoot, you're lucky if the teacher stays there long enough to do what they need to do. And our children are the ones that's suffering. And so you have to take that piece of that information and ask yourself, what educational disparities are happening that I need to be aware of so that I can find the right resources to fill the gap. Now, you see, I didn't say go to the school and protest and go and, tell the teachers there's idiots and whatnot. No, what I'm saying is there's times where that needs to be done. Don't get me wrong. But we want to take the more proactive approach to say, how can I create these opportunities for my children to reduce any educational disparities? Maybe it is a tutor. Maybe it is enrolling them into a program external from school. Maybe it is bringing it to the parent-teacher council and saying, hey, I think this is an amazing opportunity for all the children that attend the school to give them a fighting chance when they get to the employment stage. There's things that we can do, and I'm encouraging you to get off your butt and do it. Yes, Miss J's passionate today, honey. Passionate. I'm passionate about this topic because this is a livelihood, right? There are people who are going to go into running their own businesses, and there are people who are going to progress in amazing careers. And that is something that starts at a very early age. And if you're struggling yourself, then you have firsthand experience on things that you needed to change or do. If you were to reflect and look back, would I make a change? Most likely you would. Most likely you would. Let's go to the next one. And before we even jump in, if you're just jumping in, welcome to Community Conversations, where we talk about local and global topics that impact our communities, and you are part of this conversation. I'm here today. I'm Miss J, your host, and what I like to do is I like to share stats. I'm a person of numbers. I love numbers. I think numbers gives us what we need in order to make effective and efficient change. And if you're connecting with these things, please feel free to share. Hit the comments, let us know what you're thinking, what you've experienced, and we're more than happy to share those pieces. So right now, just to get you up to par, we are talking about the impacts of unemployment in our Black community. So we already kind of covered some of the stats in terms of disparity with income. We've talked about the unemployment rate itself in Canada versus our counterparts. I'm sure there are more global stats that we could be bringing to the forefront, and which we will. Right? We talked about educational disparity. Are we getting the education we need to be competitive in the world that we live in, right? Now, that may look different to every country. If your country has a better educational system, what are some of the things that you can share with us that we should be looking at in our communities in terms of education? But I want to talk a little bit now about economic inequality. So if we look at the global economic structure, it's structured in a way where the wealth is favored and it accumulates for specific groups, often leaving marginalized communities, including our Black populations, at a disadvantage, right? Economic policy may also prioritize the interests of wealthy individuals and corporations. Now you're saying, Ms. J, you're preaching to the choir. I know this, yes. So what do we need to do to make change? Now, change doesn't always, to me, in my perspective, I do not speak on behalf of Love Bay Afrobeat Music Talk Radio, though let's just be clear, Ms. J has her own opinions and her perspectives, and these perspectives are based on my experience and the research that I do typically and read when it comes to pieces like this. Now, I always talk of what, I've grown up in the world of municipal government. I worked in it. I enjoyed working with the communities I worked with, and all the communities I worked with based on my position were in marginalized communities. And as part of our community development objectives, we were always looking at how can we create equal access. And part of that is funds, right? So there were different types of programs that the city offered in order for people to access and use these funds to get to the resources that their counterparts had in different areas that were a little bit more economically sound. Now, in that, we talk about just the population that we know, but there is a massive population that's not seen. And that population is not just the Black population, but the economically challenged population. And that we know doesn't hit any specific color, it hits everybody, right? However, most of the marginalized communities I've worked in have been highly Black. And so we have to start looking at, if this is the seed here, what does it look like on a global scale? Globalization, that takes me right into that. This is where you're opening new markets, but it's also leading to a lot of job losses, especially in certain sectors, right? And this has an effect because if this is primarily what the trades or white collar jobs, they call them, or blue collar jobs, those old terms that have come up. We now know the academic versus the general. This starts all the way down the school system, if you didn't realize it. You know, there's parents who used to come to me and say, you know, they're taking their child for IEPs, independent education plans, or individualized education plans, which is a topic into itself that we'll talk about on another day. But if you look at some of those pieces that are happening in our schools, you have to think twice, because why? That follows them all through their lifetime, right? And that hurts them in university and college applications if it's not done properly. And so you have to, now how does that connect to the global side? Well, think about it this way. If we're having some disproportionate effects on the Black workers in various countries who are employed in manufacturing or lower skilled jobs, these jobs can be outsourced very quickly, right? And we see in politics all the time, they always talk about, you know, the exporting and importing, which is what creates business economics. But what people don't see is, how does it impact the people that are in these jobs? So if your child or your is working, or you're working in an industry, how well do you know your industry, right? Some people will wake up, get there, and realize they're being let go. Massive layoffs are happening. Companies are closing down and moving across the ocean and opening up for different reasons. It could be taxes. It could be cheaper labor. It could be a lot of different things, and that has a massive impact. And so if you're hearing that there are things happening in our globalized economy, it is very, very much true. We can't depend now 100% on our jobs. We can't. Okay, so the second part of the show, I'm going to talk about all the things we can do. This part of the show, I really just want you to understand what is impacting our communities. All right, let's move on to another factor. That's the politics. Yes, people that we're talking politics, but we're talking about not just who's running for president or prime minister or whatever the case is. Here we're talking about labor protection, and there's a lot of weak labor protection that's happening in many parts of the world. Labor laws don't adequately protect the workers from discrimination or exploitation, right? And this makes it challenging for Black individuals to secure stable employment. Again, we talked about the counterparts. We talked about what people are making versus, you know, Black people making versus their counterparts. We've talked about the unemployment disparities. So if you notice, you're just consistently seeing this, right? So within the disparity, there's a disparity, right? Sometimes in areas that have, or regions that are affected by political turmoil, economic opportunities can diminish. And these marginalized groups, including, and I'm not, again, not always just Black people, but it includes Black people, they're again the most affected by job loss. And for some, they're not even taking home enough to feed families. And so to top it off, their one income is gone, then what happens? Then what happens? Let's look at another global component that's impacting health. So now we talked about the pandemic. We knew that COVID-19 had a massive hit on economic stability, right? frontline jobs were at the most risk. I'm putting it there. I mean, I was blessed to be able to be doing working, because at the end of the day, I had a secure employment. But however, nothing is secure this day and age, right? Nothing is secure this day and age. There were things that were just shutting down, shutting down, shutting down. And every day my team and I used to say, our first thing was just to thank that we were able to still pay our mortgages, pay our bills, take care of our children. And not everybody had that security. And so when we look at the impacts of pandemics or epidemics or whatever the case may be, yes, we get focused on, well, the outcomes, the things that are happening from it, the deaths, the families that are being ripped apart, but we don't look at some of the bigger global pieces. A lot of businesses went down because of it, right? And even access to healthcare. Look how many things happened in COVID-19 where people weren't able to take a minute or to just breathe, right? Nurses were working around the clock. Beds were all over the place. People were being put in different areas just to be treated, and then sometimes even just forgotten because the impact. And what happened with that, a lot of that was not having enough, and they couldn't find enough nurses to help. And I'm sure this was something that happened across the world. Doctors, nurses, nurse practitioners, they were working around the clock. And so let's take it now to the unemployment side. In unemployment, how does health have impact, Ms. J? Well, it's quite simple. If you have, if you're not healthy for whatever reason, you could have any number of issues. Some of these issues are not covered through any types of benefits, and so, or sick days. Just something as simple as that. Sick days. Let's take that for a quick spin. Does your job give you sick days? Like still pay you when you're off work? For most people, no. So that means if they're sick with just a common cold and they were off for 3 to 4 days, that has a massive impact on their paycheck, which puts them behind in their bills. Now, if we don't have that access to healthcare, that's another issue. Now, there's some who have access, but they don't have the job to cover it. But then there's others who just don't have access, period. And so they are trying their best to maintain consistent employment with some debilitating diseases. Could you imagine having to go to work? Say, for example, if you had cancer and you had to go to work and you couldn't take any time off, or you didn't have access to great healthcare through your job or even in your country, it's tough. You're still having to show up because at the end of the day, you still need that money to survive. So we have to look at all of these pieces that we may not think about. We have to take them in consideration. And wherever you are in this world, you need to understand how you can take care of yourself and put in contingency plans to do so. Now, let's take a quick break right here for those who are coming in. If you are joining, welcome to Afrobeats Music Talk Radio. Love Bay is giving me the opportunity each and every Sunday to be on this platform at 5 p.m. to talk about things that impact us locally and globally, and that's called Community Conversation. And here today, we're talking about the impacts of unemployment in our Black communities. Now, we're going global, we're going local. If you are coming from a country that they may have different laws in Canada, this is where I'm situated, so I speak very much around what I understand and experience in my country. But it may be different for you. However, the things that I'm talking about are things that I researched in terms of what are some of the global factors. So if you're just jumping in, we talked a lot about healthcare. We just talked about healthcare, political factors. We talked about economic inequality. We talked about educational disparity and the systemic racism and discrimination piece. Now I'm going to say one more that we have, and that's the local economic conditions, right? So this is talking about the concentration of poverty. Many Black communities face concentrated poverty, which limits their access to jobs, resources, and economic development opportunities. Now, they say that high rates of unemployment can perpetuate cycles of poverty and reduce access to wealth-building assets. Now, I'm a big proponent of assets. I believe that everybody needs to have a financial portfolio. We will talk more on that later, but know that Ms. J just said it. Okay, honey? So we have to ensure that we are understanding what our economics looks like in our community. Where's the money going? Is the money staying within the community and building, or is it going out? Those are a lot of great questions. Now, some of the shortcomings happen in policy, and these economic policies may fail to address the unique needs of the Black communities, or they lead to insufficient job creation and support for entrepreneurship. Okay, so local economic conditions have massive impacts. You got to know your numbers, people. If you don't have a budget, get on it, because it just starts there. It starts with how are you managing your funds? As I always say, I'm going to push back. I'm going to push back. If I hear Ms. J, the people, I'm going to tell you, well, what are you doing about it? What are you doing about it? What have you done? Outside to sit down and complain that the people are trying to take you down, right? So we're going to push through that now, and we're going to take on the next side of how do we pivot. Say it with me. I can change. All right, say that. Say it again. I can change. It's very important. Why? Because building capacity to obtain gainful employment is the number one criteria to improving the economic standings that you're in. I'm going to say that again. Building capacity to obtain gainful employment is a proven method to improve your economic standings and reduce barriers to employment. So what are they? Well, let's talk a bit about them. All right. So the first one is education and skill development. That's important. Pursuing higher education, people. Now, I'll be honest. I was not a big fan of pursuing higher education. I did it, but I wasn't a big fan of it. I like to learn. I was very hands-on, and I wanted to do things that gave me real life experience. Now, if you're that type of person, then you want to make sure that you're attending a college or a vocational school or a university, wherever you're going to get the best learning outcomes. Identify who you are as a learner, right? And then go from there, okay? So skill training programs are a must. Okay, we want to make sure that we are getting information on skills that we need to enhance our abilities. Now, a lot of people have natural abilities. I can't draw to save my life. Okay, maybe I can draw something that people can recognize, but it's definitely not top of the art going into a museum or a gallery. Okay, so what we want to focus on is what is my talent? What is my skill? All right. And it's interesting to know that if you have a talent or skill, many people think that, yeah, I'm going to lean on that. I'm going to lean on that. Oh, first, let's just take a quick Karina DeGrasse. Okay, yes, thanks, Karina. That's an amazing topic. Thank you. I'm over here in this good work. Love Babe, just be trusting me with the radio station. Okay, honey, I'm here. But let's jump back in. So we're just talking about skill training programs. So you want to find certification programs that are in high demand. Now, here's something that I'm going to share with you, and you're going to maybe have a difference of opinion. But remember that sometimes you must do what you don't want to get where you want to go. I'm going to give you a minute. Soak that up. Soak that up. Okay. Sometimes you have to learn skills that are in high demand, because I'll tell you why. At the end of the day, most people are working in jobs they never went to school for. I'm going to say that again. Most people are working in jobs they never went to school for, but they had to learn new skills because guess what? The rent didn't care if you were passionate about it or not. The rent said, or the mortgage said, or the box that you're living in said, you owe me money at the end of this month. So let's get it together. So if you are looking, search for something first in demand. What's out there? A lot of jobs are coming off the market because they're being replaced by technology, right? So learn the technology. That one was for free, free 99. Get it, order it. Go to the Love Bay website, click purchase. It's on me, okay? Remind yourself that skills are Very important, period. Okay. And look for what's in demand. Second, networking and mentorship. Are you a professional networker? If you're not, get on it, learn it. Why? Because when you can connect with industry professionals through networking, it leads to job opportunities. So if just some people are always just hitting the pavement with the resume, hitting the pavement with the resume, and that's great. But you know what? You know that saying, it's not what you know, it's who you know. That's very true. That is very, very true. Because if you know organizations such as the National Black MBA Association or and Black Career, there's the Women's Network provide, that's one. They provide forums for networking and professional growth. Now, I'm not here advocating for these particular ones, but you want to look in your local area to see. It could be a chambers of commerce. It could be some kind of networking organization. Sometimes they have things that are just specifically for Black networking or career development or skill development. Jump in on all of those. No matter where you are in the world, look for what's in your community because there's someone there who is trying to change the game. There's someone there who's trying to put a network together that's going to help you. So don't sit and just lament. "Oh, I'm so broke and I'm living paycheck to paycheck. Hashtag the struggle is real." Sweetie, been there, done that. It doesn't pay off. It doesn't pay off. Okay. Then you want to look for mentorship. Now, this is something that I find in our communities we're not too good at doing. We can do better. We can do better. Now, there's something that I've recognized over the past few years as I've gone full time into business development. One of the things I notice is that people go and they attend all these workshops. They're at everything free, 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 free. But what they're not doing is actually trying to connect with somebody who can help them to navigate through their journey to get where they want to go. So let's just say you wanted to be in management, or you wanted to be an engineer, or you wanted to work in any capacity that you're thinking of. The first thing that you want to do is find someone who works in that capacity and ask them, not demand, not just it be intrusive, but ask them if they're willing to mentor you. Now, mentorship looks different for different fields. Okay. Mentorship is not I'm holding your hand and walking you through. That's coaching. Mentorship is focused around saying, can I touch base with you as I'm going through my journey so that you can help me to see what's coming down the pipe, or you can maybe point me in the direction I need to go to get to the end result. That's what mentorship is. And some people mistake mentorship and coaching for two different things, right? A busy professional, a busy entrepreneur, or somebody who's really out there doing it, they don't have the time to answer your 55 questions per day. There's a modicum of expectation that you are going to put in the work just as much as they are. Okay. So check out where you're trying to go and look in the field and see, are there people there who can help me get where I need to go? Now, the third one is career development services. Now, this is good. Okay. Here's a simple thing that many people don't do. They don't actually rehearse for their interview. Yeah, no, it's not frozen. That's just me giving you a moment to soak it in. Uh-huh. Soak that in. Many people don't get their career or get jobs because they just assume what they have is enough. But you want to find areas that are going to teach you how to write your resume, what interview techniques you could use, especially if you're a person who gets super nervous, right? How to search for jobs, because there's a strategy that you can use that can significantly improve your chances of employment. For example, community centers. I know in our area, I'm sure in the rest around the world, there are not-for-profits and community centers that offer services for free or low cost if you're struggling with that. Then you can use that information and use all those techniques at job fairs and workshops. So are you attending any? You gotta know. Employers are always out there seeking people for jobs. And I've been to my fair share of jobs as an employer, and I've been in my fair share of as employee looking for other opportunities. And you'd be surprised how many of us are not in the room. I'm gonna say this again. You'd be surprised how many communities are not in the room. Again, I told you I'm always gonna call a spade a spade. What I see is what I see. But if you're not out there actively at these events, then you are cutting yourself short from it changing the narrative of your life. Okay. So you want to seek out those valuable resources. All right. Just doing a check-in. I hope everyone's doing good. If you need to take a quick bio break or not, I'll be here when you get back right here on Love Bay Afrobeat Music Talk Radio. Yes, each and every Sunday at 5 p.m. we have community conversations, again, talking about what's hot, what's not, what's impacting our local and global communities. I'm Miss J, your host, and what I do is just simply bring things that are happening to the forefront and pushing it out there for you to think about and to start having some serious conversations. Now, if you want to converse with me, I'm here. You can definitely hit up the comments. If not, if you have something that you want to see on the show, please hit us up at infolovebay@gmail.com. Now, why is this show important? Again, it's going to help push the narrative of things that we need to, as Black communities, to take accountability and make change. And change happens. It's uncomfortable, but when it happens, it's a beautiful thing. And so here's this platform for your voice to be heard. Today, we're talking about the impacts of unemployment in the Black community and how that's taking us in all different directions. And we did some just rough stats around the averages. We talked about education, the different factors, political factors, economic factors that are impacting us. And now we're just talking about some of the things that we can do right here on the ground floor to start making global change. So no matter where you are in the world, all of these pieces or these tips and techniques I'm talking about applies to you, okay? So if you haven't hit the replay, we'll go through those pieces again with you. And if you're just jumping in now, we'll just be wrapping up on some of the great stuff that we can be doing. Now, we talked about technology being the thing that is a threat sometimes, right? For some businesses, they're using this to replace a lot of positions, right? Something as simple as writing newsletters and emails. Now, you could do that at a touch of an AI, right? And so people are losing their jobs because technology is getting stronger. But what does that mean? It doesn't mean we go and hide in a ball. It means we do what? We learn, right? We can access digital literacy programs where you can improve your own digital literacy because it's essential. It's no longer now like I choose not to use it. Now it's how good am I in using it, right? Also, too, you want to make sure you have access to the computer and to the internet. This helps helps individuals get a lot more searching done for jobs and improves your application process, right? So gone are those days where you used to, print out your 10 resumes and you went trudging from store to store or from company to company. And hi, can I give this to your HR department? Hi, can I give this to your HR department? Hi, I'm looking for something. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't do that, but people are just whizzing through now. And there's a lot of platforms and software that say, we're going to help match your skills with this employment opportunity. And then you go and get your interview and voila, you have a job. So if you're understanding how to use technology, and I'm not just simply saying turning on the computer, I really mean like understanding that there are systems out there that can help you to maximize your job search. You just have to dig into them. I'm not a tech wizard, so don't ask me no questions on that. Okie doke. All right. Now, the last one that I want to push to you is building. Actually, no, there's two. There's two that I want to close off with. One being advocacy and policy engagement. Get involved. Did I come up close enough to you? Get involved. That's super important. Why? Because it promotes equitable hiring practices and supports the workforce development programs that are happening. Those workforce development programs are here as a way to address systemic barriers to unemployment. Now, you're going to say to me, Miss J, been in these jobs, they don't listen, they don't accept. Keep talking. Keep talking, right? If I can urge you all to do anything, it would be to keep talking. Just keep talking. It's tiring, but we do it for our children. We do it because we know if we continue to talk and we continue to give them what they need, they will hopefully eventually get it, right? But more importantly, we know that we have to because they don't understand the impacts. Don't think about yourself in this moment. Think about those who are coming behind you. What can you do to help start chipping away at these impacts that are having a negative outcome for our communities? What can we do? Are we sitting on the union boards? Are we sitting in our committees? Are we asking to be part of the hiring? Like, what are we doing to help change the narrative? Community involvement. If you're not somebody who can get through it, do it at work, well, why don't we do it in your community? There are a number of organizations that work on economic issues that can help to elevate the conversation about employment challenges and solutions. Are you part of that? Are you part of that? Are you part of that solution? Or are you still on the other side creating the problem, right? Sometimes we pacify ourselves to say, well, we're too small to do anything. But there's something I teach all my clients: leverage collaboration, which means that if everyone puts in $10 and there's 10 of us, that's $100. And we will get that faster than one person putting in $100. It's the same with this. Community involvement is about giving you a platform for your voice, just like this community conversations platform. This stems from conversations that I've been having, and the producers and I, we talk about different topics, and we all seem to come to something that just kind of resonates that we're hearing out there, and unemployment is a big one. It's a big one. And we're saying to ourselves, how could we help? And this is how we're helping. We're helping you by saying, get involved. Stop whining and complaining about what you don't have, and role model what you are going to get. I'm going to say that again. Role model what you are going to get. Because why? We have a lot of eyes watching us. And if we don't do it, if I don't do it, and if I don't show my kids that here I am every Sunday putting out the word and having these conversations, and who am I to tell my child to get out there and go out there and be the best that you can be? We have to get involved in our community, figure out a way to be involved, figure out a way to help elevate this conversation. Now, my last one, and this one is my favorite because I love skills, is building soft skills. Okay. Now, one of the things that really help when it comes to building skills is understanding a few key things such as communication, right? Teamwork and problem solving. Now, I've been in management at work, and I've reported to people in my career. And one of the things that I recognize that have a strong impact is, and I'm talking about some of the Black staff that I have, they come in, like they go in funny. Like, yeah, I went to the supervisor and I told her this and blah, 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 blah. And I'm just like, whoa, wait a minute. Wait, you said what? Nah, girl, you fit to not have a job after that, right? We have to understand how to connect with people and make our voices heard without coming for their neck. And I'm going to say that plain. I've had it happen to me. I've probably done it sometime in my early career before I figured out that I wasn't climbing any kind of ladder by telling everybody about themselves, right? I mean, mind you, it was true, but there's a way to communicate. And so these soft skills are some of the things that hold us back. People get angry and they want to express themselves, and and they go about it in such a fervent way that they don't realize that you're hurting your chances of advancement. Okay, so there are ways to do that. There's ways to connect with people if you're having at work and your career is kind of, going left or right. There's ways to connect. And it's critical when you're in the workplace, because more time than not, if you're looking to be promoted, then you have to really think about your actions. Do they want a leader who is just kind of popping off every 5 minutes on things that are happening in the workplace? You have to ask yourself those questions, because sometimes if you don't realize that you're putting the nail in your own coffin, and that you're more looking at losing your job versus getting a promotion in it. So you want to focus on soft skills. If you're a person who feels that at meetings you get hot-headed or on things that are happening, take time to practice. How can I communicate and get this across? How can I be a team player? At work, are you part of the things that are happening, the culture, the environment? How can you create, or not even just create, but contribute to a healthy environment? Right? Sometimes it's not the healthiest of healthy environments. However, you, instead of shunning away from it, are you taking the initiative to make it better? to maybe insert some of your strengths like problem solving or decision making or communication, right? So get on those soft skills. Find out what they are. Now we put them on our resume. I have strong interpersonal skills and I can write and I can speak and blah, blah, blah. That's great. But are they exercising every day? Are you learning? Change management, soft skill, but very powerful, right? Learning how to do things like SWOT and SMART technique and SWOT analysis. These are skills. They're all soft skills that can be used across the board. Okay. So there you have it. Today we talked about the impacts of unemployment in Black communities. Yes, I said a lot. Yes, I did. And I hope you got something from it. But the one thing I want you to walk away with is you must be part of the conversation if you want to see change. No longer can you stand on the sideline and say all the things that are wrong in our communities. We need you to get involved and actively make change by simply changing you. Can I say that again? Leveraging collaboration. If every person took accountability for the things that they wanted to change in order to get where they should be in life, your community's face will look different. I don't care what space you're in, what world you're in, what global continent, wherever you are the change. You make change happen. And it starts by having the conversation. So if you are that person, go out there and mobilize action, mobilize it and take ownership for it. And then collectively make it happen. Sounds like a plan? Thank you so much for being here. I had a wonderful hour with you. It's an hour already, right? But I had a wonderful hour talking to you about the impacts of unemployment in Black communities and that we are the change. And if we can understand what factors are stopping us from being employed or what are factors that are then we can make some sufficient changes. Now, we can't control everything. I'm not going to say that just because you have great interpersonal skills, it's going to, open up the whole world. But what it does do is it just tells you that if there is one door closed, there's 5 doors that are probably open. You just have to keep knocking before you find that one, all right, that fits you. And I always say that your career or your business and you are one. So look for something that speaks to your strengths, your skills. Look for things that areas in your own professional development that are weaknesses or threats and eliminate them. If you can focus on doing that, you most likely will not only just be exposing yourself to better opportunities, but you're building your network as you go along these journeys, connecting with people who are now seeing you for who you are and what you can possibly do, and maybe where you can fit. That's that right here on Love Bay Afrobeats Music Talk Radio. I'm Miss J for Community Conversations. And if you missed any of this amazing content, then I want you to hit the replay and I want you to check it out. Next week, new topic, new things. If you have something you want us to address that's happening right now, hit us up at infolovebay@gmail.com. And do not forget to tune in 5 p.m. every Sunday here with me and my co-host, who is just me today. You got Miss J, right? But tune in with us and let's talk. Let's have those conversations that are impacting you. On that note, have an amazing day and we'll talk soon. Bye.